Hello, everyone. This is Gary London. I'm senior principal with London Motor Advisors. And to be honest with you, I was going to record this video in my late model Tesla because I wanted to make a point about new technology and its impact on land use. And I wanted to share it with you in a way that was most impactful. So I was going to put it on my little gimbal thing here and put my iPhone on it and do it while I was driving. But I discovered something, and it is that even if I have it on full self-driving mode, which is what I wanted to demonstrate and talk about today, the little video camera in the middle of the car near the front window, at the front window, will detect the fact that I don't have my eyes on the road, that I in fact have my eyes looking at the cell phone, and it will immediately cut me off from full self-driving. So let me start from the beginning here. So Elon Musk announced about 5 weeks ago that he was going to offer what they called, I forget exactly what they call it, but full self-driving mode, which is sort of autonomous light in all late model Teslas that could accept the software. And he was going to offer that for a month. And then subsequent to the month, if you still wanted to keep it, he was going to reduce the price of it from approximately $200 a month to $100 a month. So I was kind of anxious to check it out, to see how far we had gone with this autonomous vehicle software, to see if, we've gotten to the point where he had announced, my gosh, it must have been 8 years ago, that if you paid him $12,000, you get into sort of the front of the line to have this software. And then fast forward, finally, the software is there, installed in the car, free of charge, go try it. So I did. So I took it out here in San Diego, and you have to sort of tell where you want to go through the navigator, and then you have to keep your hands on the wheel, and you have to keep your eyes looking forward, and it tells you what it's going to do as if it was a navigator, but it does it yourself. And I put it through a very significant run. In other words, I took it on city streets that were very complicated, lots of traffic circles, construction going on, lots of people, bicycles, people crossing the street, cars coming from all directions, and it works magnificently. This is one of the core points of this video, which is that we are very close to autonomous vehicles. I realize that there's some people out there that are agnostics about this, and that there's been some reported crashes, and there's been some people that haven't been fully satisfied with it. But by and large, this software is very, very good. So here's the dilemma. Should I buy it? Should I buy it every month? Now, for those of you who know me, you will know that I like stuff. I like new technologies. Interesting to me. I'm glad that I live at a moment in time when all this technology, Zoom and autonomous vehicles, are either on us or about to come on us, because it's fun stuff to have and to experience. And the answer is, now that it has been cut off, the month is over, the experimental month is over. Now that it's over, and I have to ask myself, should I spend $100 a month for this? The answer is no. And the reason that the answer is no is very simple. It's not really full self-driving yet, because the regulators still require that you keep your hand on the wheel and that you keep your eyes on the road. So I asked myself, what's the point? If it's driving by itself and I have to still pay attention, why bother to spend the money and have it drive by itself? So the point is that between the technology and the regulators, it's not ready for prime time yet, but it will be someday soon, very soon. So what I'd like to talk about today is, what are the implications when your automobile really does become autonomous? And that's really a subject that's really quite relevant, because it's so close to being ready now that at some point, maybe in the next year, maybe 2 years, maybe 5 years, we were going to see a lot of autonomous cars. It might be Elon Musk's robo-taxis, it might be some Waymo, might be some other kind of company. But this era is about to come on us. So what are the implications of that? Of course, I'm a real estate and land use guy, so I think of it from those perspectives. Well, let me give you a couple of ideas. First of all, have you ever taken a train to work? Some years ago, before I started my company, I worked for a large consulting firm, and I had a big job where I was running a whole Western region. And the deal was they allowed me to live and work in San Diego most of the time, as long as I made occasional pilgrimages to Los Angeles. Well, how did I do that? Well, I realized that through the traffic and the stress of driving through LA traffic and to get to LA, probably didn't make sense for me to drive most of the time. What did make sense, however, is for me to take a train. So I took Amtrak. I got on the Amtrak train here in San Diego, and it took 2.5 hours to get to downtown Los Angeles. And then I had a short commute, usually a taxi from the train station and Union Station in Los Angeles to where I needed to go in downtown LA. And what did I do during that 2.5 hours? I worked. I pulled up my computer. I got on my cell phone. I got a lot of work done. Now, I have to admit, on the way home on the same train, probably didn't work as much, probably had a glass of wine, maybe talked to some people, usually fell asleep. But at least I was productive going up there. And by the time I got into the office, I could spend my time networking and having meetings and doing other things other than spend time in front of my computer. And so it was really very efficient. So the way to look at autonomous vehicles, if you're in a car, is think of it as a train without tracks. In other words, when we get to the point where you don't have to actually drive the vehicle, or just as importantly, not be penalized for not paying attention anymore. In other words, when you can work, be on your phone, read, do it, watch a movie, do whatever you're doing, and the vehicle gets you from point A to point B. What are the implications of that? Well, one implication is that the stress of commuting goes away. And if the stress of commuting goes away, and you're productive at the same time, it means that you don't have to live near where you work anymore. So if you happen to be a young family, the head of a household of a young family, and there are a lot of people like this right now who either can't afford or choose not to purchase a home in San Diego, but their job is in San Diego, and they choose instead to live in southern Riverside County, say Temecula, which is a big phenomenon. A lot of commutation on the I-15 corridor by those very same people. Today, that's a very stressful commute. It's stressful going south in the morning, stressful going north in the afternoon. It's very congested, very, very long commute. If you're not driving, however, if you're not having to pay attention, then you can be productive during those commutes. As a matter of fact, if that in fact is the case, you can actually commute further without any stress. If you couple that with the fact that many people don't have to be in the office every day of the week anymore, we've got this concept now of sort of hybrid workplace where you make an appearance in the office once or twice a week, but you can work at home the rest of the time. That, coupled with the advent of an autonomous vehicle, opens up the door for you to even live further away. So I can see a situation where instead of having to move to Temecula to work in San Diego, if you have a quality of life that says you want to move further, say the Coachella Valley, Palm Desert, Palm Springs, you could do that. Much longer commute, but you could be productive during the few times a week or the couple times a week that you might commute to your place of residence in coastal San Diego or in Orange County or in Los Angeles. So in other words, the idea behind the technology is for you not to have to pay attention while it's moving you from point A to point B. If you can be productive during those times, it really doesn't matter that you have to commute a little bit longer. And that has a tremendous impact potentially on urban form. It tends to spread out urban form, create the potential for new communities and communities in the exurbs and in existing suburbs and places that may not have offices or places of work, but you can afford a home, you can afford a good quality of life. It's where you want to raise your kids. and you'll go to work every once in a while in your autonomous vehicle. So it has a chance to sort of spread out the urban form throughout America. That could be a real significant result of the advent of autonomous vehicles. Conversely, here's another scenario. If you don't have to be the driver of a car, own the car, drive the car, take it to work, and even if your commute is much shorter, if you are in a car which is now autonomous, that car moves out of your garage, picks you up in front of your house in the morning, takes you to the office. Let's say it's only a 20-minute or a 45-minute commute. And once it gets to the office, it can just drop you off. Now, if you own the car, it doesn't have to park there. It could park further away in a cheaper parking place, a more remote parking place. Or if you live not so far from work, it might just go home and wait for you until you summon it at the end of your workday. Or maybe you don't own the car. Maybe you're part of a club. Maybe the new model for car utilization, auto utilization, is you become part of some kind of auto club where you share the car. Or maybe it's Uber. There'll be new models that come out of this technology. And regardless of what the model is, the car doesn't need to be parked. So if you don't own the car, for instance, if you just have a 8 o'clock call and that the car is supposed to show up at your front door at your house, takes you to the office, then it drops you off and it goes on and finds the next passenger and does the same thing. If you own the car and your commute is a little longer and you don't want it to go home, maybe it circles for a while, or maybe it goes to a remote parking structure, as I say. But here's the implications of that. If the car doesn't need to park in the building that you work in, it means that future buildings don't have to be designed and constructed with parking spaces. And we in the feasibility business wonder what the implications of that are. Well, one of the obvious implications is that if we don't have to build a parking structure, then we don't have to include that as part of our hard costs of development. And that takes a whole chunk of the cost of an office building sort of out of the picture and changes, the entire economics of building vertical buildings in downtown areas and in central areas. So the implications of that, could be quite significant. Now you might ask, well, if a car is doing all this extra driving, maybe it's better off that it's parked. And the answer is it probably won't be, because right now, even though the penetration of alternative energy cars, principally electric cars, like a Tesla or Rivian or some of the other domestic manufacturers of electric cars, they're all going to be building them. If the penetration is only, say, 10% right now, there's a lot more electric cars that are going to come into the market, particularly, we're sort of at a transition point in today's market. When they get less expensive, then you're going to see more people drive the car. Not everybody has what I have. I've got a solar roof, and I've got the plug-in for my vehicle in the garage, and effectively my electric bill is covered by the solar. We got the credit thing going on with the energy company, and I don't pay anything for fuel. I did have to incur the sunk cost of the solar panels, but that'll pay for itself, I think, within 5 or 6 years. So the economics work for me, and so I think that ultimately, as cars get less expensive, the economics are going to work for more and more people. I think we are going to see a tremendous amount of electric car penetration in the markets. It's just that new transportation systems take a long time, just as the autonomous vehicles took a lot longer than that moment when Elon Musk announced that you could pre-purchase autonomy. And now we're just seeing it start to work, and it's still not there yet. Think back when automobiles were first put on the roads, or what could be called roads, back in the early part of the 20th century. It took a good 2 decades for enough people to be able to purchase cars and then for roads to be built. It takes a long time for new transportation systems to play out, and I have no doubt that this is going to take some time to play out because there's a lot of issues still. There's range anxiety that's somewhat cured because the new vehicles get a lot of range. There's new charging stations. Finally, looks like there's one standard that would be the Tesla standard to charge. There's new charging stations coming out, and so the next change that we're going to see is some of these changes to urban form. And it could be two things can be true at the same time. We may see more horizontal development as a result of the autonomy, and we may see more vertical development as a result of the autonomy. So what are architects doing today? What are builders looking at today? Well, in the buildings that we're consulting on, either new buildings or conversions, we are starting to look at parking structures as temporary, as transition spaces in a building where today they might accommodate cars, but at a point when the cars no longer need to be accommodated, or when you don't need as many spaces, then we can transition those spaces the way that architects are now designing the structures into people spaces. That means people spaces to work, people spaces to live, perhaps warehousing spaces, perhaps data centers, vertical data centers, could be a lot of different things. Could be retail. The point is that if we are still designing structures in buildings, but it looks like we're designing them as transition, knowing that we're going to sort of move into this brave new world. So I think the moral of the story is this, that past is not prologue. There's a lot of technology that's thrust upon us. None of it is as significant as autonomous technology, electric technology in vehicles, because it's the vehicles that take us to work. And if they take us to work, it changes the relationship between where we live and where we work. And that change of relationship has the potential to change urban form. Now, one last thing before I leave this topic and this video today, and it is that a lot of people are asking, well, what happens to mass transit? And again, two things can be true at the same time. We can still invest in various kinds of mass transit where it makes sense and recognize that autonomous vehicles are going to come. So mass transit doesn't have to be fixed rail. Maybe that doesn't make as much sense in sort of auto-centric Southern California. Maybe it makes more sense in more concentrated urban areas where it mostly exists today. Maybe it stays in those places. Maybe what we're talking about with respect to mass transit, again, is autonomous buses. Or smaller buses that can sort of come and get you on demand. In other words, not just 4 or 5 person autos, but 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 person buses or minibuses. The possibilities are endless with respect to how we sort of bring in autonomy into the mass transit world, not to mention Elon Musk's tunnel. Maybe that doesn't make sense. Maybe it makes sense. But we have to sort of now think about how we live, where we live, and what the shape and look of our buildings are going to be relative to how do we get there and what are our needs going to be in the building. So while we're having sort of a current conversation over the fact that we have too much office space, that's a big conversation right now that I'm having with all my clients, and many of you are having as well. The conversation needs also to be when that transition happens, when the dust settles and we sort of figure out how much office space we really need, part of that conversation becomes also is how much parking space do we need? Where should these buildings be located? How are people going to get there? How do we accommodate them in terms of the design and master? How do we accommodate autonomous automobiles, pickup, drop-off points in urban settings or suburban settings? Lots of questions need to be answered, which we don't have the answers to, but it's all a very, very compelling subject. And as always, thank you for watching this video, and I will see you next time.